The sound of the slap didn't register as a noise at first. It felt more like a sudden, violent change in air pressure that popped every eardrum in the Zen garden. Then came the sting, a sharp, localized inferno blooming across my left cheekbone, radiating heat into my eye socket. My head had snapped to the right from the sheer physics of the impact, and for a split second, I was staring directly at a trellis of white wisteria, watching a single petal drift lazily to the ground. I tasted copper, blood. I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. "Did you bring them?" Sylvia asked. Her voice wasn't shrieking. It wasn't hysterical. It was terrifyingly calm, conversational, pitched at a volume that suggested we were discussing hors d'oeuvres rather than the fact that she had just assaulted me in front of 45 stunned witnesses. "The keys, Morgan. Did you bring the keys to the Skyline loft?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. The string quartet had stopped mid-measure. The cellist's bow was hovering inches above the strings, frozen. The polite chatter of the cocktail hour had been severed as if by a guillotine. I slowly turned my head back to face her. Sylvia stood there, her chest heaving slightly beneath a dress that cost more than my first car. She looked expectant, triumphant even. Her hand was still raised slightly, suspended in the air, fingers splayed. She wasn't looking at me with regret. She was looking at me like a dog trainer waiting for a recalcitrant spaniel to finally sit. "Well?" she prompted, smiling that tight manic smile she saved for charity galas and bullying service workers. "We're all waiting, dear. Lydia and Marshall need to start moving in tomorrow." I reached up, my movements deliberately slow, and touched my cheek. My fingers came away trembling just a fraction. I felt for my earlobe. Gone. My grandmother Matilda's vintage diamond drop earring, the one she'd worn to board meetings in the 80s to intimidate men who thought they could buy her out, had been ripped clean off by the force of the blow. I scanned the ground. It was gone, lost somewhere in the pristine, manicured gravel of the venue. "You dropped something," Sylvia said, her eyes gleaming. "Maybe if you hand over the Penthouse keys, we can help you look for it." The audacity was so pure, so chemically refined, it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. This is what Matilda had warned me about. This was the moment, the ambush predator moment. Sylvia had calculated this perfectly. Strike when I'm surrounded by social pressure, at her daughter's wedding, where making a scene would paint me as the villain. She thought the slap was the end of the conversation. She thought violence was the period at the end of the sentence. I locked eyes with her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't lunge. "You didn't just hit me, Sylvia," I said. My voice was quiet, steady, skipping across the silence like a flat stone on a frozen lake. "You just liquidated your own retirement." Sylvia blinked, the smile faltering for a microsecond before reassembling itself. "Don't be dramatic, Morgan. It's a wedding. Give your sister-in-law the gift she deserves." I didn't answer. I simply turned my back on her. "If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you." Walking away is an art form. If you run, you look guilty. If you storm off, you look emotional. You have to walk like you have somewhere more important to be, even if your face is throbbing like a bass drum. I placed one foot in front of the other, navigating the maze of round tables draped in cream linen. I could feel 45 pairs of eyes burning into my spine. The guests were frozen tableau of shock. I passed my cousin-in-law Rebecca, who was holding a champagne flute halfway to her mouth, her jaw literally unhinged. "Morgan," she whispered as I passed. It was a question, a plea, and a check-in all at once. I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I stopped, I would start shaking, and I refused to let Sylvia see me shake. "Morgan, wait." That was Neil, my husband. The man who had stood by the appetizer table shoving bacon-wrapped dates into his mouth while his mother publicly dismantled our boundaries. I heard his footsteps scuffing on the flagstones behind me. He was jogging to catch up. I kept walking, my eyes fixed on the exit sign above the ivy-covered archway. "Morgan, please," Neil hissed, grabbing my elbow just as I reached the perimeter of the garden. I stopped. I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked at his face. He looked pale, sweaty, and terrified. Not for me, but of the situation. "Let go," I said. "She didn't mean it," Neil blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in a desperate attempt to patch a dam that had already burst. "She's just stressed. It's the wedding, the heat, the champagne. You know how she gets." "She slapped me, Neil." I know, and that's wrong, obviously. But if you leave now, it's going to look like what?" I interrupted, tilting my head so he could see the angry red welt rising on my skin. "Like your mother assaulted me. Because that's what happened. That is the factual reality of the last 60 seconds. We can fix this," he pleaded, glancing back toward the party where Sylvia was now loudly laughing, probably telling everyone I was hysterical. "Just come back. We'll talk to her. We'll smooth it over. Don't ruin Lydia's day." "I'm not the one who ruined it," I said, pulling my arm free from his grip. "And Neil, if you follow me to the car, I will lock you out of the apartment tonight. Stay here. Be the good son. It's what you're best at." I turned and walked through the archway, leaving him standing there, mouth open, a coward in a three-piece suit. The moment I broke the line of sight from the garden, the whispers erupted behind me. It sounded like a hive of bees had just been kicked over. I could hear fragments. "Did you see the keys?" My God, her face, swirling into a cacophony of judgment and glee. The parking lot was a gravel expanse that seemed to stretch for miles. The heat of the afternoon sun was baking the rows of cars, creating shimmering waves of distortion above the hoods. My car, a dark gray Range Rover I'd bought with the same bonus that paid for the Penthouse, was parked in the back. Reaching it felt like crossing a finish line. I fumbled for the handle, threw myself into the driver's seat, and slammed the door. Click. The lock engaged. Finally. The silence inside the car was different. It was heavy, insulated, smelling of leather and the faint lingering scent of my own perfume. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes. The adrenaline dump hit me then. My hands, which I had forced to be steady in the garden, began to tremor so violently I had to grip the steering wheel to stop them. My breath came in short, jagged gasps. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hot, angry tears, but I refused to let them fall. Crying would ruin my makeup, and if I was going back in there, I needed to look like a statue, not a victim. Wait, back in there? Yes, Matilda wouldn't run. Matilda would burn the fields. I reached for my phone. It was time to initiate the nuclear option. I needed Garrison. Garrison wasn't just a lawyer, he was a weapons system in a bespoke suit. He had been my grandmother's attorney for 40 years. He knew where the bodies were buried because he had usually dug the holes. I tapped the screen to unlock it. Nothing happened. I tapped it again, harder. Black screen. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I pressed the power button. I held it down. The screen remained an abyss. Then I saw it. A spiderweb fracture running diagonally across the glass, originating from the top corner where the impact point was shattered. I flashed back to the slap, my head snapping back, my clutch slipping, the phone tumbling from my hand and hitting the stone paver before I scooped it up in a daze. I hadn't checked it then. I pressed the button again, desperate. A flicker of green light, a glitching line of static, and then darkness. My phone was dead. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. My phone wasn't just a communication device, it was my vault. It held the text threads from 3 weeks ago where Sylvia had asked for the penthouse, and I had explicitly said, "No, never, stop asking." It held the voicemails she'd left, passive-aggressive wheedling that turned into demands. It held the proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a surprise gift, but a calculated extortion attempt. Without that phone, it was my word against hers. And Sylvia? Sylvia was a master of narrative. Right now, back in that garden, she was spinning a web. She was probably telling everyone that I had promised the keys, that I was mentally unstable, that I was ruining the wedding on purpose. I looked at the dead device in my hand, a useless brick of glass and lithium. Think, I commanded myself. Think like Matilda. The false lead arc, lost advantage arc. I had lost my primary advantage. I couldn't play the recording of her threats. I couldn't show the texts, but I still had the trust. The trust documents didn't live on my phone. They lived in physical, ironclad reality in Garrison's office safe, and, if he was as paranoid as I hoped, in the trunk of his car. I needed to call him. I looked around the car interior, my dashboard display. I hit the connect button on the car's touchscreen, searching for device. Device not found. Damn it! I slammed my hand against the steering wheel. The car couldn't pair with a dead phone. I looked out the window. The venue was an old estate. No payphones. I saw a catering van parked 2 rows over. A guy in a white apron was smoking a cigarette, leaning against the back doors. I took a deep breath, checked my face in the rearview mirror. My cheek was blooming a vivid, angry red, and opened the car door. I walked over to the catering guy. He looked up, saw the bruise, and his eyes widened. "I need to borrow your phone," I said. "Emergency." He didn't ask questions. He just handed me a cracked Android. I dialed the number I had memorized when I was 12 years old. It rang once, twice. "Garrison," a voice graveled, professional, alert. "It's Morgan," I said. "Code red at the Hartwell estate. Sylvia just assaulted me." A pause, then the sound of a chair scraping back. "Did she make contact?" "Open hand, full force, in front of 45 witnesses. She's demanding the keys to the loft." "I see," Garrison said. The temperature of his voice dropped 20 degrees. "Are you safe?" "I'm in my car. But Garrison, my phone is smashed. I lost the text history. I can't prove she planned this." "You don't need texts, Morgan," Garrison said smoothly. "You have a bruise, you have witnesses, and you have the claws. I'm 19 minutes away. Do not leave, do not engage, and for God's sake, put some ice on that face." He hung up. I handed the phone back to the caterer. "Thanks," I said. He flicked ash onto the gravel. "Lady, whoever did that to you, I hope you sue them into the Stone Age." "Oh," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "I'm going to do much worse than sue." 19 minutes is an eternity when you are sitting in a hot car with a Ziploc bag of melting ice, courtesy of the catering guy, pressed against your face. I watched the clock on the dashboard. 18 minutes. 19 minutes. At exactly the 19-minute mark, a vintage Jaguar E-Type, British racing green, crunched into the gravel lot. It was an absurd car for a crisis, but Garrison didn't believe in blending in. He believed in arriving. He parked next to my Range Rover and stepped out. Garrison was 70, silver-haired, and wearing a 3-piece charcoal suit that cost more than the wedding venue rental. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a consigliere for a fallen empire. He carried a battered leather briefcase that looked heavy. I got out to meet him. I lowered the ice pack. Garrison stopped. He looked at my cheek. He didn't wince. He didn't offer sympathy. He inspected the damage like an appraiser looking at a cracked vase. "Solid contact," he noted. "Zygomatic arch is swollen. Definitely photographs well." "She wants the apartment, Garrison. She announced it as a gift during the toasts." "Of course she did. The public pressure tactic. Amateur." Garrison set his briefcase on the hood of my car and snapped the brass latches open. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet lot. He pulled out a thick, bound document. The Margaret Ashford Estate Trust. "She thinks she's playing poker," Garrison said, pulling a fountain pen from his pocket. "She doesn't realize we're playing Russian roulette, and I just loaded all the chambers." He handed me a fresh, cold bottle of water from his car. "Clause 7B?" I asked. "Clause 7B, he confirmed. "And since there was physical battery involved, we trigger the aggravated hostility addendum. She loses the lake house immediately. No probate. No arguments. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the ice pack. The lake house? That's her identity. She hosts the summer solstice party there every year. Not this year, Garrison said, snapping the briefcase shut. Ready to crash a wedding? I look like a prizefighter, I said, gesturing to my face. Good, Garrison said. Let them see the blood. It makes the paperwork more convincing. We walked back to the garden together. Me in my emerald silk dress with a face like a dropped peach, and Garrison moving with the silent, predatory grace of a hammerhead shark. The mood in the garden had shifted. The shock had worn off, replaced by a frantic, boozy energy. People were drinking faster, talking louder, trying to pretend the bride's mother hadn't just slapped the groom's sister-in-law. Sylvia was holding court near the open bar. She had a glass of white wine in one hand and was gesturing wildly with the other. She had drawn a circle of sycophants around her, her bridge club friends mostly. I could see her pantomiming something, looking like the victim. She's totally unstable, I heard her say as we got closer. I just tapped her cheek, a playful tap. She's always been dramatic. Then she saw us. Her eyes flicked to me, then to Garrison. The transformation was instant. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a special effect. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. She knew who Garrison was. Everyone in the family knew Garrison. He was the Grim Reaper of the Ashford fortune. The crowd noticed her reaction and turned. Silence fell again. This time, it wasn't shocked silence. It was the terrified silence of school children realizing the principal has just walked into the cafeteria. Garrison didn't stop at the edge of the patio. He walked straight through the crowd. Guests parted like the Red Sea. He didn't say, "Excuse me." He just walked, and people scrambled out of his way. We stopped 10 feet from Sylvia. "Mrs. Ashford," Garrison said. His voice wasn't loud, but it projected to the back row of the white folding chairs. "I believe you have something that belongs to my client." Sylvia laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound. "Mr. Parrish, I didn't know you were invited. This is a private family celebration." "It ceased to be a private celebration when you committed criminal battery against a trust beneficiary," Garrison said smoothly. "Battery?" Sylvia scoffed. "Oh, please, it was a disagreement, a family squabble. Morgan is overreacting as usual." She looked at me, her eyes hard. "Did you really call a lawyer, Morgan? Because I lightly touched your face? How petty can you be?" "Lightly touched?" Garrison stepped to the side so the sunlight hit my face fully. The bruise was undeniable now, purple and angry against my pale skin. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. "That looks painful," someone whispered. "Sylvia." Neil stepped forward from the shadows near the buffet. He looked wretched. "Mom, just stop." "Hush, Neil," Sylvia snapped. She turned back to Garrison, squaring her shoulders. She was cornered, and she was dangerous. "You have no authority here. This is a wedding. Morgan agreed to give Lydia the apartment. She promised. I'm simply holding her to her word." "She promised?" Garrison raised a single skeptical eyebrow. "Strange. Morgan recalls explicitly refusing your request on multiple occasions." "She's lying," Sylvia shouted, losing her cool for the first time. "She promised me. I have proof." This was the pivot, the moment where she tried to rewrite reality. Sylvia reached into her sequined clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She snapped it open with a flourish. "I knew she would try to back out," Sylvia announced to the crowd, waving the paper. "That's why I printed it out. An email from Morgan, dated 3 weeks ago. Dear Sylvia, I'd be honored to gift the loft to Lydia and Marshall. Here are the details for the transfer." She held it up. From a distance, it looked legitimate. It had the Gmail header. It had my name. The crowd murmured. Heads turned toward me. "Is that true?" Lydia asked. She was sitting at the head table, mascara running down her cheeks, looking completely broken. "Morgan, did you promise it?" My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't written that. I knew it was a forgery, but my phone was dead. I couldn't pull up my sent folder to prove it. I never wrote that, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Lydia, I swear, she's faking it. Why would I fake it? Sylvia countered, emboldened by the crowd's confusion. Look, it's right here. She's just jealous that Lydia is getting married and she's trying to sabotage the day. She's a liar. The doubt was spreading. I could see it in their faces. Maybe Morgan was crazy? Maybe she did promise it and changed her mind? It was the perfect gaslight. Let me see the email, Garrison said. He held out his hand. Sylvia hesitated. It's my copy. If it's real, you have nothing to fear, Garrison said. Hand it over, Mrs. Ashford. Reluctantly, Sylvia handed the paper to him. Garrison held the paper up. He didn't need a forensic team. He didn't need a computer. He just needed his eyes. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at Sylvia. This is a remarkable document, Garrison said dryly. It proves she's a liar, Sylvia insisted. Actually, Garrison said, his voice cutting through the noise, it proves you are incompetent at fraud. He turned the paper so the crowd could see it. This email is dated September 31st, Garrison said. Silence. There is no September 31st, Garrison continued. September has 30 days. Always has. Always will. A ripple of laughter, nervous, shocked laughter, broke out near the back. Furthermore, Garrison continued, enjoying himself now, the header shows the sender address as morgan.ashford@ogmail.com. Morgan's email address, the one she has used for 10 years, is morgan.ashford@ashfordholdings.net. You didn't even check the domain name. He crumpled the paper in one hand. It made a harsh, dry sound. This is a forgery, Garrison declared, and a clumsy one, which adds attempted fraud to the list of your violations today. Sylvia stood there, her mouth agape. The prop had failed. The lie had evaporated. She looked small suddenly, old. I might have misprinted, she stammered. Stop, Neil said. He walked over and stood next to me. Finally, Mom, just stop lying. You made it up. Sylvia wasn't done. She was a cornered rat. It wasn't just the email, she cried, looking around wildly for support. She told the wedding planner. She told the planner to prepare the announcement. Ask her. She pointed a shaking finger at the wedding planner, a woman named Sarah who had been hovering near the DJ booth, looking terrified. Sarah, Sylvia barked. Tell them Morgan approved the announcement. Sarah stepped forward. She was young, maybe 25, holding a clipboard like a shield. She looked at Sylvia, then she looked at my bruised face. She took a deep breath. Actually, Sarah said, her voice trembling but clear, Mrs. Ashford, you told me to ignore Morgan. Excuse me? Sylvia hissed. Sarah flipped a page on her clipboard. I keep notes for liability. Right here, at 10:15 a.m. today. Mother of the bride instructed staff to cut Morgan's microphone if she tried to speak during toasts. And here, Mrs. Ashford stated she would handle the backlash regarding the loft announcement and that we were to proceed even if Morgan objected. Sarah looked up. You specifically told us she would object, and to do it anyway. The garden went deathly silent. That was it, the smoking gun, the undeniable proof that this was a premeditated ambush. Sylvia looked at Sarah with pure hatred. You're fired, she whispered. I quit, Sarah replied, clutching her clipboard, and I'm keeping the deposit. Garrison stepped forward. He placed the crumpled forgery on the table. Well, he said, I think we've established the facts. Now let's talk about the price. He opened his briefcase again. The sound of the latches clicking open was the sound of a guillotine blade being hoisted up. Clause 7B, Garrison announced. The aggression penalty. Garrison didn't shout. He didn't need to. He opened the binder to a page marked with a red tab, the paper crackling in the humid garden air. The Margaret Ashford Estate Trust is not a standard inheritance vehicle, Garrison began, looking over his reading glasses at Sylvia. Matilda anticipated that certain family members, specifically those with a history of financial entitlement, might eventually attempt to coerce the younger generation. He tapped the page. Clause 7B, the anti-coercion provision. It states that if any non-beneficiary attempts to force a beneficiary to surrender trust-protected assets through intimidation, public pressure, or... He paused, looking pointedly at my throbbing cheek. Physical violence. They immediately forfeit their own standing within the Family Support Fund. Sylvia's face, which had been pale, turned a sickly shade of gray. You can't do that. That fund pays my credit cards. It pays for the club. Not anymore, Garrison said. The moment your hand connected with Morgan's face, you triggered the forfeiture. It's automatic. I don't decide it. The trust decides it. He turned the page. And since the aggression occurred at a public event, intending to use social leverage to bypass legal ownership, the penalty is doubled. Let me break this down into numbers you'll understand, Sylvia, Garrison said. He pulled a silver pen from his pocket and did a quick calculation in the margin of his legal pad. The slap, he said, pointing to my face, that specific action, based on the current valuation of the assets you just forfeited, that slap cost you approximately $1.2 million. The crowd gasped. A literal ooh sound rippled through the wedding guests. The lake house on Relentless Lake, Garrison continued, ticking off items on his fingers. Gone. It reverts to the trust. The quarterly dividends from the tech portfolio? Gone. They will be reinvested for the grandchildren's education. Grandchildren you won't be seeing much of, I imagine. Sylvia staggered back slightly, her heel catching in the grass. The lake house? We've summered there for 30 years. William loves that house. She looked at her husband, William, Neil's father, who was standing by the punch bowl looking like he wanted to dissolve into the landscaping. You traded $1 million property for a moment of violence, Garrison said cold. Bad trade, Sylvia. Mathematically unsound. Is this real? The voice came from the gazebo. Lydia, the bride, had stepped down from the raised platform. Her train was dragging through the dirt, but she didn't seem to care. She walked past her mother, ignoring Sylvia's outstretched hand, and stopped in front of me. She looked at my face. Really looked at it. She reached out a hand as if to touch the bruise, then pulled back. Mom said... Lydia's voice shook. Mom said you wanted to give us the loft. She said you came to her and offered it as a surprise. She said you were just being shy about the announcement. I never offered it, Lydia, I said softly. I told her no 3 weeks ago. I told her no again today. Lydia turned slowly to face Sylvia. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was pure betrayal. It was the look of a child realizing the monster under the bed is actually the person tucking them in. You lied to me, Lydia whispered. On my wedding day, you staged this? You hit her? I did it for you, Sylvia shrieked, desperate now. They don't need that much space. You and Marshall want to start a family. I was trying to secure your future. By stealing from my sister-in-law? Lydia yelled. The sound cracked her voice. I don't want the loft, Mom. I never asked for it. Marshall and I are happy in our rental. Marshall, the groom, stepped up beside his wife. He looked terrified but resolute. We didn't know Morgan. I swear to God, we thought it was a generous gift. We didn't know she was stealing it. I know, I said. You're not the enemy here. The garden was silent again. The ball was in my court. Garrison looked at me, giving a microscopic nod. Finish it. I stepped forward. My cheek throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a steady, painful rhythm. You have 2 options, Sylvia, I said. My voice was raspy. Option A, Garrison files the paperwork Monday morning. You lose the lake house. You lose the stipend. You lose everything the trust gives you, and I file criminal assault charges for the slap. Sylvia made a choking sound. Or, I continued, option B, you apologize, right now, in front of everyone, and you sign a document admitting that the Skyline loft is mine, that you will never ask for it again, and that you lied about the email. Sylvia looked around at her friends. Her social standing was vaporizing in real time. I can't choose, I said. Pride or property. You have 10 seconds. Garrison checked his watch. 9, 8, 7. Sylvia looked at William. He turned his back on her. She looked at Lydia. Lydia was crying into Marshall's shoulder. She looked at her bridge club friends. They were all suddenly very interested in their shoes. 5, 4. I'm sorry, Sylvia blurted out. It sounded like she was vomiting the words. Not good enough, I said. Be specific. What are you sorry for? Sylvia trembled. She was shaking with rage, with humiliation, with the sheer unfamiliarity of accountability. I'm sorry I struck you, she gritted out through clenched teeth. I'm sorry I misrepresented your intentions regarding the apartment. And the loft is yours. It has always been yours. I have no claim to it. And the email? I pressed. The email was fabricated, she whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Garrison, I said. Garrison produced a document from his briefcase. He drafted it in the car. He placed it on a high-top cocktail table next to a vase of white roses. Sign it, he said. Sylvia walked to the table. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. She scribbled her signature, dropped the pen, and looked at me with eyes that promised eternal vendetta. Are we done? She hissed. We are, I said, but this is Lydia's wedding, and I don't think she wants you here. I looked at Lydia. It was her call. Lydia wiped her face. Her makeup was ruined, but she looked stronger than she ever had in her life. She pointed to the exit. Go, she said to her mother. Lydia, you can't be serious. I planned this whole... Go, Lydia screamed. Take Dad and get out. You ruined it. Just leave. William, to his credit, grabbed Sylvia's arm. Come on, Syl, it's over. He dragged her away. Sylvia tried to maintain some dignity, lifting her chin, but the effect was ruined by the sound of her heels clicking frantically on the stone path as she fled the scene of her crime. The silence that followed their departure was heavy, but clean. The poison had been drained. 10 minutes later, I was back in the parking lot. I couldn't stay. The adrenaline was crashing and the pain in my face was becoming blinding. Garrison was packing his briefcase. You handled that well, he said, snapping the lock shut. Matilda would have been efficiently pleased. I feel like I just ran a marathon in heels. I leaned against my car. Did we go too far with the lake house threat? We didn't take the lake house, Morgan. Garrison smiled, a rare, wintry expression. We just reminded her that we could. The threat is often more potent than the execution. That document she signed, it's a confession. If she ever looks at you sideways again, I file it and she loses the house for real. You own her now. He got into his Jaguar. Ice that face. Take 3 ibuprofen. I'll bill the trust for my time. He drove off. I was alone. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gravel. I touched my cheek. It was hot to the touch. I had won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Neil drove us home. He had been silent since the garden. The atmosphere in the car was suffocating. Every time he shifted gears, his hand brushed near mine, and I pulled away. Morgan, he finally said, his voice cracking. I don't know what to say. Don't, I said, staring out the window at the passing city lights. I should have stepped in sooner, I know that. I froze. She's my mom. I'm programmed to not rock the boat." "Your mother slapped your wife," I said flatly, "and you stood there eating appetizers." "That's not rocking the boat, Neil. That's cowardice. You let her abuse me because it was easier than dealing with her anger." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said, "but sorry doesn't fix my face, and it doesn't fix the fact that I now know exactly where I stand in your hierarchy of fear." We pulled into the garage of the Skyline Loft building, my building. "You're sleeping in the guest room tonight," I said as we got into the elevator. "Morgan, please." "Guest room," I repeated. "Or a hotel. Your choice. But do not try to come into the master bedroom. I can't look at you right now." The next morning, I woke up and walked straight to the bathroom mirror. It was bad. The bruise had blossomed overnight into a lurid map of violence. Deep purple at the center, fading to sickly yellow and green at the edges. The imprint of her ring finger was visible near my temple. My eye was swollen, halfway shut. I heard footsteps behind me. Neil stood in the doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept. He saw my face in the reflection and gasped. He actually put his hand over his mouth. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Morgan." "Take a good look," I said, turning to face him. "This is what keeping the peace looks like." He started to cry, silent, shaking sobs. I promise I'll never let her near you again." "I don't need your promises, Neil," I said. "I need action. Here is the deal. You are going to therapy. A real therapist, not your golf buddy who gives life advice. You are going to figure out why you are a 35-year-old man who is terrified of his mommy. And until you do, we are roommates. Nothing more." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "Okay, I'll go. I'll do whatever it takes." "Good," I said, turning back to the mirror to apply concealer that I knew wouldn't work. "Because if this happens again, the next thing I evict won't be your mother. It will be you." December, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Skyline Loft, looking out at the city covered in a light dusting of snow. The coffee in my mug was hot. The apartment was quiet. My apartment. It had been 90 days since the wedding. The bruise was gone, though I still had a faint phantom ache when the weather turned cold. The diamond earring was never found, a sacrifice to the gods of war. Things were different. Sylvia. She was essentially in exile. She still had her lake house, but she lived in terror of me. We'd seen each other once, at a funeral for a distant relative. She had crossed the street to avoid walking past me. Garrison's confession document was framed in my home office. Metaphorically, it was actually in a safe deposit box, a nuclear deterrent that kept the peace. Lydia. She and Marshall had bought a small fixer-upper in the suburbs. No help from Sylvia, no strings attached. We went to lunch every other Tuesday. She was still in therapy, deprogramming a lifetime of being the golden child, but she was happier. She told me she finally felt like an adult. Neil, he was trying. He was seeing a therapist named Dr. Eris twice a week. It was ugly work, unpacking decades of enmeshment. We were still in the rebuilding phase. I hadn't fully forgiven him, and I wasn't sure I ever would completely, but he had started standing up to Sylvia on the phone. It was a start. I took a sip of coffee. The wedding had been a disaster. I had lost an earring. I had taken a punch. I had traumatized a string quartet. But as I looked around my living room, at the velvet sofa I had bought, the art I had chosen, the keys sitting in the bowl by the door that belonged to me and me alone, I knew one thing for sure. I had paid the price of admission, and I had kept my home. Matilda would have been proud. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.